Hi, everyone. So, welcome to the Banh Chronicles podcast. My name is Randy Kim, and I am joined by a special guest today. His name is Dr. Fazlur Rahman. He was born and brought up in what is now called Bangladesh. After his medical education in Dhaka, New York, and Houston, he practiced cancer medicine for 35 years in San Angelo, Texas. He is an adjunct professor of biology at Angelo State University, a senior trustee of Austin College in Sherman, Texas, and an advisory council member of the Charles E. Cheever Jr. Center for Medical Humanities and Ethics at the University of Texas Health Science Center in San Antonio. His articles, essays, and stories have appeared in many publications, including the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Guardian Weekly, Harvard Review, Newsweek, and so much more. And he is the author of Our Connected Lives Caring for Cancer Patients in Rural Texas. And now his latest book, The Temple Road, A Doctor's Journey. And he and his wife, Ara, have lived in West Texas for most of their lives and have raised four kids. They love walking in nature and going on wildflower adventures. So, welcome to the show, Dr. Rahman. Congratulations on your latest book, A Temple Road, A Doctor's Journey. What is your feeling right now with the release of your book and sharing it to an audience?
That's a good question, Randy. First, thank you so much for having me. And I believe I'm the first Bangladeshi in your show. And I feel that because, if you don't mind, Bangladesh is the fifth largest country in Asia out of 48 countries, and then fifth or sixth in the world. So if you take the population account, not just the wealth, when you count the human beings, so that country should count.
Hmm.
So thank you for having me. The book, my premise was that if I want to understand my present, then I have to understand my past. And so that's why, after living all these years, growing up in Bangladesh, what is now Bangladesh, and living in the US 57 years, I thought that my book, The Temple Road, A Doctor's Journey, will illuminate some part of the another culture and another world of medicine. It's a medical and cultural memoir. And I've been very pleased so far by the reception. And again, my hope is that it will illuminate the path for some people, maybe some soothe or get inspired that someone coming that circumstances, difficult circumstances, has made it. Perhaps I have a chance to make it too. So that's the purpose of the book, and that is the reason for writing the book, to share my experiences and my, uh, you know, thoughts and ideas as much as I could.
Yeah, and you talk about you were growing up in what is now Bangladesh. What can you describe about the environment that you were growing up in um, during that particular period?
Okay. Remember that well, you're young. So it's 60, 70 years ago when I was growing up. I'm 81 now. Uh, it was forested countries. There's a small number of population, much smaller, and a lot of nature, trees, forests, birds, rivers. Some of them have dried up now, and most of them are gone. All those myths and superstitions and palaces and mosques and temples. So they had their own charms, and I grew up in that environment, both different cultures together, Muslim culture and Hindu culture together. So those things obviously influenced me the way I was grew up at that time. And another reason some of the things I remember, some people have asked me how I remember so much, is simply because remember, we did not have any TV 70, 80 years ago. We did have very few people have radio. Okay, if or very few had some gramophone, listen to the music records with the what is that called that not the tape or anything, the disc and all that.
Hmm.
So that's rare too. So we did not have too much distractions like we have now. Children are so busy, cell phone, this and that, and music and all sorts of things. I'm not blaming technology. We didn't have any of that. So we grew up in a quieter environment and in a beautiful nature and all that. So those things also affected me when I grew up. And that's what I write about in the book too. The
Hmm.
myths, superstitions, nature, and all that. including the people's palaces and all, and mosques, temples.
Doctor, in your book, you shared about the loss of your mother at an early age. And what did you remember about your mom?
Okay. Um, First and foremost is that the in those days she was a very brilliant student. That's what my grandparents told me, and others told me to her classmates and others. And at that time, primary school was up to fourth grade. So she became top in the class. And in those days, girls uh, couldn't do that, very uncommon. Mostly upper class Hindus and upper class Muslims, boys had the upper hand. And the headmaster told her parents that, Hasina, her name Hasina, Hasina is a very bright girl. Send her to junior high school and then to high school. She will go further. But at that time, parents, village parents, even the Hindu parents, they wouldn't send any girl to a town, for um, education in the sense that they didn't feel comfortable with that. And the junior high school was in a town far away. And the primary school was in the village. And the village name is Bazitpur, Bagitpur, which is in India now. And so she couldn't go to high school or junior high school, but she always was very interested in reading, and she read the stories of the Prophet Muhammad and Noah's flood and all those, and she was a good storyteller. And then the second that she also read from the Ramayana, Mahabharata, and all those kind of things. In those days, we grew up in a kind of like both cultures. And I'm predominantly, obviously, being a Muslim culture, but both cultures, you seep into you. And so I was very close to her because I was a very sickly child. I had stomach trouble since I was a kid. I have diarrhea and all that, and I have fever and chills and all sorts of things. But I'll get better with treatments, this and that, herbal medicine, COVID, and sometimes what you call regular doctor, very rare. And then one day when she got sick, she was at the end of her pregnancy while she was helping the maid servant during the harvesting season when the hired hands fell behind.
Mm.
And she said she wasn't feeling well. I remember that vividly. And then she went to bed and told me to get a glass of water, which I did, and told me to call one of the midwives, who is kind of like a village aunt. If you grew up in Asian culture, you'll know that in the village, everybody is aunt and uncle or something, okay? And you're supposed to respect
Mm.
it too. So call, her name is Saira, but it's called Aunt Sarah, I wrote, I think. The call answer. So I went to her and she started smiling. And I said, my mother is sick. Why she is smiling? And
Mm.
she says that you're going to have another sibling. So she came and my grandmother, own grandmother, she was a very wise lady. They went inside the room and I could hear from the veranda. They wouldn't let me go inside. Veranda that she is screaming is whatever else that is in between the pregnancy spasms, delivery spasm. And the grandmother and that aunt trying to console her. And they wouldn't let even my father go inside the room.
Mm.
That was the way in those days, like even in the hospital, even in this country, actually, in those days, they didn't allow males to go inside. Now
Mm.
anything can go in, husbands and partners and all that. So he can go. So, and then at the almost midnight or so, then the midwife came out on the veranda and told my father, Anowa, said that, she's not doing well, get the doctor. That at that time, the tigers used to come from Sundarbans to our area in the north. Tiger's habitat is the Royal Bengal tiger habitat is the Sundarbans, which is one of the World Heritage site. It's a forested area, swamps and forests and all that. Two-thirds of it belong to Bangladesh and one-third belongs to West Bengal of India. But in the winter months when the food got short, as the tigers came to our area in the north, which is only 40, 50 miles, maybe maximum 60 miles, and continue a jungle in between the villages and the fields. And you're from Cambodia? You're from,
Cambodia, and I have family from Vietnam and Cambodia. Yes.
you will see that.
hmm
Ask them in those 60, 70 years ago how forested those countries
hmm
were. Okay.
hmm
Same way,
hmm
tropical country. So the doctor didn't want to come because they were everybody scared of the tiger and all that at that time. And even though people went to get him, he came next morning and it was too late. But he said his arrival wouldn't have made any difference. But she had a breech delivery. What happens is that fetus get stuck, and you can actually manually move them, and it's not that, it's not that complicated. We have the dexterity and you know how to do it, but she couldn't do it. The midwife waited too long. So she was already dead. So about my mother is that I was so close to her since I was sickly. I spent more time with her than my brother, older brother, who was 2, 3 years older than me, because he was healthy and busy with the other boys like the village boys do. And so that was, then she called me and my father. She knew that her end was near and she tried to, I remember that she tried to lift her hand to touch my face, but she was having a hard time. And in between the spasms, she was talking. So those things are hard to forget. 7-year-old can remember a lot, especially I told you that it was a different kind of atmosphere. And I answered those questions something before that if my mother lived 8 years, like I have lived, she would have told me all kinds of things and advised me all sorts of things like mothers do, and I
hmm
would have forgotten that. But the fact that she was there, asked me for a glass of water, and then a couple of hours later she was gone, and that was very hard, difficult part. And my father, my brother, my grandmother, they all tried to explain to me, but it was very confusing to me that I thought my mother was invincible. She wouldn't die, A 7-year-old, that's what you think. So that's what I remember mother and her storytelling, her closeness to me or my closeness to her, her sudden death after I gave her a glass of water, which she asked for. So those things are remained etched in my memory. And Randy, that is, as we go through life, we go through a lot of traumas, okay? Some big, some small, obviously. And luckily, we forget most of them. That's how we can go on with life. But there's some memories, some incidents, and some events, it stay etched in your memory. Okay?
Yeah. And
And
oh yeah, I was just gonna say because my father, his mother died when he was a very young kid, and I think he was maybe like 5 or 6 years old. I think the only he doesn't talk about her very much. I think the only thing he mentioned was that I remembered, seeing her body laying and peacefully, and I think that's hard to as a kid to ever get that out of your memory. It stays with you. It revisits, and
right.
yeah, and I think about grief quite a bit in our greater Asian communities across
Right.
the board. And I wonder, what did your mom's passing teach you about grief growing up, and what were you taught about what that looked like? Because I think as a kid, when you have families trying to explain to you what your mom's death meant, it's very confusing for a little boy.
Or that, yeah, first thing you are
Mhm,
right.
mhm,
Confusion was the one thing. And then, like, I still remember my grandmother, I think she was trying desperately to console me, my brother, and other members of the family. She was the matriarch.
mhm,
And in those days, in male-dominated society, she was the matriarch in the family, and she had the say. She started to tell me it's God's will, it's God's will. It didn't make any sense to me why God would take my mother. She didn't do any harm to anybody, things like that. So confusion and grief is that it's a kind of a sense of emptiness and sense of loss and sense of not having anything, even though you have everybody else around you. You feel like that there is no mother to go to. And
mhm,
if I have some problem, whom do I tell it to? Who will understand me? even there are other people that they are definitely want to care for me, want to help me, want to console me, but it's not like that mother did, 'cause that's the she was the one I was very close to, and she taught me too. She taught me reading, writing, arithmetic, and all that, and so grief was definitely a problem. And what it taught me is that sometimes you have to give time to people. You can obviously you have to console them, give your time, and give your patience, and give your understanding to someone who is going through grief. And don't expect that, suppose, to give you an example, my father had a very difficult time when she died suddenly.
Hmm.
We were very close. And in retrospect, I feel like he had depression, now that I'm a doctor.
Hmm.
But people kept saying, oh, man can become sad, but if he's strong enough, he can come out of it, okay?
Hmm.
Uh, so this is kind of related to sadness and grief kind of go together. So people didn't understand, except my grandmother did. He got the hired hands to keep him busy, take care
Hmm.
of the land here and there, business, whatever he had. And that definitely helped. In the same way, I also learned uh, how to find a world, in the sense that my mother got me interested in books. My brother
Hmm.
is too. He's a novelist. His name is Bozur,
I
Bazluy.
can see why you have so many books behind you.
Thank you. So, so I started reading books, this and that. I started my mother, and that was also another world to sort of console me in the sense, reading the stories, this and that, and I immersed myself into that. So taught me what grief, that first and foremost thing, understanding, understanding. Because when you're a cancer doctor, you see, death and dying, and especially when I started practicing 51 years ago, at that time, um, cancer medicine was not as progressed, a lot of the mortality was high. Now we do much, much better. And so some of the things, I'm not saying that is absolutely followed it, but definitely those things stayed in my mind, that these people are going through grief. And as difficult as for me to see it every day, the same thing, more or less, I still have to have an understanding that everybody has a different way to handling grief. And that
Hmm.
thing, definitely we need to understand. Everybody has a different way
Hmm.
to understand the grief. We cannot force people to bring out of grief. And first,
Right.
you have to give time, and second, you have to
Hmm.
give understanding,
Hmm.
and perhaps sometimes not to give too much lecture, in the sense that, oh, you should accept it, it's God's will, this and
Hmm.
that, which is
Hmm.
okay. And if you're a believer, that's fine.
Hmm.
And if you're not, doesn't matter. I mean, grief is grief. It happens to everyone
Hmm.
when they have a great loss.
Hmm. One of the things that struck me about your writing is the level of vulnerability you share. And, it's often easy to think about how older Asian men tend to be very stoic, private, and guarded about their own vulnerabilities. What do you think has allowed you to be open with your vulnerability?
No, you brought up a real good point. And
Mhm.
that's some people in the West, I think many understand, but they have a little difficult understanding Asian culture. Um, we tend to, the families, everything tend to be very close knit, correct? In a village, like they say, it takes a village to raise a child, all right? It is true. If you did something wrong in the other part of the village, it's going to come to your parents, all right? So you remember that. So uh, anyway, um, the vulnerability is that I have been asked that before. It's a difficult question to answer. The question is that if you want to be, I'm not saying that I'm any more honest and any more memorist, okay? So the book actually was quite long, and
Mhm.
I even after cutting down, it was 130 words, and I think original was only 150,000 words.
Mhm.
And what I was doing is that I'm connecting all kinds of peripheral characters. They're interesting, in the village, in the high school, and here and there, college, medical school. But then, to answer your question, I went to Breadloaf Writers Conference. You know Breadloaf. That's the most prestigious writers conference in the country.
Mm,
Luckily accepted. I submitted the Temple wrote the title chapter. And Cheryl Strayed, Strayed, her book Wild became very famous memoir, And also there is a movie at it. She was the instructor. That's been a long time, in 2013, I think. And she looked at it and she read it. She liked it very much. She said, all those stories are very interesting, what you are saying, but you are telling about everybody except your own story getting diluted with that.
mm,
Memoir is a matter of selection,
mm,
and memoir is a matter of uh, what is necessary, what is not necessary in the
mm,
story itself.
mm,
So you need to write about your own story, more than you write about other people's stories. They are interesting, all right,
mm,
but after all, it's your memoir, not theirs.
mm,
And the characters that are absolutely necessary, obviously they have to be there. But to think about your own story. And that helped me a lot also. I did quite a bit of thinking that what is my story, what I'm trying to say.
mm,
And I realized that I have a lot of points that are not easy to write or easy to discuss or easy to tell. Randy, I mean, you do these things.
mm,
What is in your mind and what you want to put on the paper don't always go together, okay?
mm,
On the paper.
mm,
Then I decided that, I have to tell my own story. So that's what, good or bad, whatever it is, So that's what the vulnerability you're talking about. I didn't think in the sense of vulnerability at that time, obviously. I just knew that what is my own story and what I went through and
mm,
what I did not go through and what had mattered to me, at least at that time when you wrote the book.
mm,
So I
mm.
hope that answers your question.
It,
Vulnerability is that
yeah.
if you want to tell your own story, you have to tell it. If you want to be a macho, that's up to you. But
Mm,
what you real life you went through, do the best you can. So I try to do that.
mm. Have you had that discussion with your family, your own children, when you were writing this book? And were they aware of your story prior to you writing this memoir?
I think that yes, what happened is that, remember, the lot of these stories, some of it actually, were published here and there, like Personal Essay in Harvard Review,
Mm,
which became, what is the notable essays, two of them. Then also two chapters came out in Lancet, which is one of the most prestigious medical journals. They have an essay section, and they had the picture of my village and picture of me as a pre-med student and all that in Lancet. So they read all those things. Plus, I inserted fragments of my, memoir here and there, essays and articles. So they had an understanding, but they didn't know that this degree, the suffering was this degree until they read the whole thing. But they definitely had understanding that dad had a difficult time after her mother died. And probably the person who knew most is my wife, because you've been married so long that we know about it. So when I was writing, she knew what I was trying to get at. But yes, they had an understanding, but until they read the whole book, probably they didn't get the full picture. You know,
and how did they react to hearing the
they
intimacy? Yeah.
well, I'm biased, but they liked
Mm,
it very much.
mm,
I think they appreciated understanding their
mm,
father and appreciated what their parents came through and all
mm,
that. And remember, their life here is quite different that what our life was.
mm.
Yes, they like it. Thank you very much. And they
Yeah.
also encourage my writing too.
Hmm.
So I appreciate that also.
Yeah.
Uh,
What brought you to the journey to America? Um, uh, what was uh what was the because I know you were going to medical school and training
correct,
and
correct.
what was the
In-
thinking of
Incentive,
yes, what
in,
was the thinking of you going to
yeah.
America? Hmm.
Well, it's a very convoluted answer. To keep it simple, I don't know if you remember the history of Bangladesh. There's a brutal civil war between Pakistan and East Pakistan. East
Hmm.
Pakistan was Bangladesh before. And I came here in 69, and all those um, unrest started between 69, 70,
Mm,
71 was the country became Bangladesh. And the country was run, and I'm not getting political, I'm just
mm,
answering your question. Bengalis had not too many chances. We are Bengalis, that is Bangladeshis. The country was mostly run by the West Pakistanis and non-Bengalis. And they had good people too, but military dictators were brutal. So I wanted to have a higher education. And on those days, uh, all the people of Indian subcontinent went to UK. And there we got what they call MRCP, Member of Royal College of Physicians, FRCS, Fellow of Royal College of Surgeons. Those are prestigious. So that's what I was supposed to do. And but I found out, you have to go through a certain amount of bureaucracy and all that. And then I inquired about American medicine. I got curious because so many Nobel laureates said that are coming from US and all that. So I used to read it in science and medicine. And I found out that I have more control coming to the US for higher education. I have to pass an exam called ECFMG, what it stands for Educational Council for Foreign Medical Graduates. And you took this exam in consul in Dhaka, US consul. And if you passed it, then you applied for internship in the US at that time. So that's how I figured that rather than waiting for England or UK, if you want to call it, then I got a chance. I need to get out before things get worse here. Then I won't be able to get out at all. In retrospect, my family suffered a lot in that
mm,
civil war. And so my wife too came at the right point, right before the brutal civil war. She came really after me. So that was the reason to come to the US, mainly because of the chances of higher education with so many
mm,
science and medicine Nobel laureates. I thought Nobel laureates
mm,
are a special breed. And secondly, because I had more control, I could appear in exam and come and get the offer.
mm,
So that was the main reason
mm.
to coming to the United States.
Yeah, you've been doing your practice in rural Texas for years and years, and I'm curious about what you saw about the community you were serving and living in terms of what you've observed in terms of health, in terms of the demographic, and how you were trying to fit in and raise your family there.
That's a good question. I remember that after you leave your village, okay? That's why it's called Temple Road, then because
Mm,
it remember literal Temple Road and metaphorical Temple Road. I
mm,
wrote about. Uh, um, the After living in Dhaka so many years, which is a huge city, and then New York, and then Houston. These are all some of the biggest cities in the world and in the country. And coming to West Texas, which was at that time, I think 60,000 population, it was quite different. And I write the reason why I came. And like everything else, that most people welcomed us. There's certainly some people didn't want us, because we are brown skinned or at that time when I came and was trained, actually, even in trainings in New York, Houston, the top places, almost all doctors white males,
mm,
very few women doctors, I mean, percentage wise and all that, and including Baylor College of Medicine also, which is where I was about 5 years for postgraduate training. Small number of compared to so many others, female physicians. So here, I was the first foreign-born doctor in this town and first Muslim actually in this town. So uh, some people are difficult accepting, but vast majority they accepted me because what I do, not necessarily what I am. But don't always look at that way. I don't know if you have noticed it or not. So it was a little bit difficult in the getting adjusted because it's an isolated community. Obviously, later I made friends, and once I get involved with my patients and their lives, I was more absorbed with them. To answer your question, most of it was good, but some were a little difficult, especially in the beginning. Now a lot of people know me and respect me, and I respect them. There is even I don't know if I sound like an publicity. Recently, Angelo State University, where I teach, I haven't taught for a while, but medical humanitarians to pre-med students, a lectureship, prestigious lectureship called the Distinguished Science Lectureship has been named after me and my wife, and it's called the Fazlur Rahman Distinguished Lectureship in Science, honoring Dr. Roy Moon. Dr. Moon was our mentor, and so we have had so far 14 Nobel laureates in science and all the world-class scientists. So those things came after a long time, remember, but not in the
Mhm.
beginning.
Mhm.
In the beginning, I had some difficulty until people got to know me and I got to know them. We did, and then my wife made a lot of friends and they loved her and she loved them.
Mhm.
Um, if that answers your question.
Yeah, and in your long time career as an oncologist, how does one frame the conversation around hope and death with patients and their families, and especially like within even your own community?
It's a very, it, it, it- you get all this training from big places. Some of it's a little bit ivory tower. You don't know much, a whole lot about them in practical life until you start practicing it because you're right in front of the patient's bedside and patient is looking at you and asking a question. Um, I think that in the beginning it's a little bit hard to answer question about, but two things are most important. And I learned from one of my mentors, Dr. S.M. Rao. He said that your patient's healing begins with your empathy and with your reassuring presence at the bedside. And I'm not saying that I followed it all the time, but that always stayed in my mind. And I have my share of failings. So you learn as you go along. You look at your own life. You have been through suffering and grief yourself. All right. And secondly, that my family members, my teachers gave me hope. Otherwise, I wouldn't make it. Despair is the worst thing that can happen to you. Then you give up everything. So you find out, suppose somebody has breast cancer, a woman has a breast cancer. You find the best points you can, good points. And then as you go along, you learn better and explain to them that, every breast cancer patient is different and every human being is different. Just because somebody died of breast cancer, something happened to someone, it doesn't mean it will happen to you. So you have to give hope, not necessarily false hope, because if you take care of a patient, say for months and years, then you become very close and you know each other. At that time, patients themselves will know. You don't have to be MD PhD or that. I have tried everything. My doctor has tried everything. Nurses have tried everything, and there's not much left. This is time for me to go to hospice
Hmm.
and make the quality life the best I can. Yes, you have to give hope, and you have to give them moral and support. And you have to give the patients, especially when they are very vulnerable, very difficult situation. One of the problems with cancer, and it bothers me more, it's becoming more and more impersonal. I don't want to pontificate, but I see it. I have written about it too. Uh, and giving time, that's the hardest part. Do you follow me? Giving time.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, uh, you know, giving time is the hardest part. So giving some time, giving hope that there are things we can do, and cancer treatments are progressing all the time, which is actually true. And that, I've had patients that I thought not going to make it. The first patient that, if my read book, Our Connected Lives Caring for Cancer Patients in Rural Texas, I'd like you to read it to Randy when you have
Hmm.
some time. The first patient start with that. I thought the patient will die and everything. I sent her to hospice, and that patient lived 23 or 24 years, so it could be long too.
Wow.
And even though it says caring for cancer patients, rural Texas, is that stories, those stories apply to all patients, whether Chicago, Houston, Boston, doesn't matter.
Hmm.
Rural Texas, because that's where I got my practical experience and personal experience with my patients. And our connected lives because my life was connected with them and their lives were connected with me as long as we are with each other, took care of each other.
Yeah, I
I'm great
want.
deal from patients too.
Yeah, I just think about like hospice and palliative care, especially when you have to have difficult conversations, not just with the patient, but their families,
Yeah,
especially if you are not of white descent or European descent. Like the conversation around death is very, very taboo and very much a struggle, especially coming whatever belief system you come from and having to tell a patient's like or family members like hospice is the quality of life. And I think that's a hard thing to get around because for them, hospice is the end is here. It's like, this is it. This is the final road. And palliative care is kind of like this pathway to hospice. It's like if you're chronically ill, you're not going to get better, but you're not in an immediate 6 month or less
exactly.
final stage. So I wonder what that must be like to have to like get through the cultural of intergenerational context of it all.
Um, I don't know how much exposure to have the Hispanic patients. Some of
Mm, mm,
South America and Mexico, they have some, we have a lot of Hispanic patients.
mm,
Something in common. I'm talking about the older generation, not the younger generation. They will come and say, please don't tell my mother or my father it's cancer. Just talk to us.
mm,
And then I have to be, honest with them. I said, look, I'm going to give the chemotherapy for months, or I'm going to send her to radiation. She's going to know more than you think as time goes. Many of them don't speak English.
mm,
And the second is that if she doesn't have an understanding what she's going through,
mm,
she's going to be more frightened, which is true. If you don't know something, it's not always easy to accept some bad news, but at least you have an understanding what it is, then it's a little easier, okay? Versus you're going blindly without knowing. So I try to explain to them, look, they have to know, she has to know, he has to know. Otherwise, it's going to be hard for her, or hard for him, and also hard for the doctors and nurses to take care. So you need to let me at least explain. And if you don't want to do it, that's fine with me. You need to let me explain. And almost all patients appreciate that. Okay. Nobody likes it,
mm,
obviously, the bad news. But that's to some extent it Asian culture too. I also remember, and even here in big centers in New York and Houston, a lot of times in 60, 70 years ago, we didn't talk about cancer openly, not at all. And like cancer and psychiatric diagnosis, we didn't talk openly. And cancer, he said mitosis. Mitosis means cell division.
mm,
Patient has mitosis, this and that. Patient has a growth. Patient has a tumor. Everything except cancer, all right? So slowly, slowly, we have understanding now. People go to online, people all kinds of things. So it's not the same way it was like 60, 70, 50, 60 years
mm,
ago. So we have to understand the cultural medicine is very important because now it has become more acceptable, popular than it was before.
mm,
Cultural medicine is important for two reasons. One, uh, let's start with the psychological understanding of patients, okay? That these patients, elderly, they are respected, and we try our best to keep them from harm. We can't sometimes, so we don't want to hurt them,
mm,
which is a good intention, but sometimes there is no other way of short of being honest with them without being blunt. That's one. And secondly, we give all kinds of diet recommendations, correct? So a diet recommendation, somebody from, say, uh, Brazil, or somebody from some remote part of Mexico, somebody from remote part of Bangladesh or Vietnam or Cambodia. If you get the same kind of advice that you get a Western diet, it's not going to make
mm,
uh, it's not going to do much help. So you have to understand what they eat, and I'm not saying you have to be an expert on that, but
mm,
have some understanding. Okay.
Mhm.
So, because nutrition is a big part of cancer treatment.
Mhm.
So, culture, understanding the patient and patient's philosophy in that sense is very important. I've always been interested in patients' lives beyond medicine itself. That's why I wrote the Our Connected Lives, Caring for Cancer Patients in Rural Texas, where the temporary doctor's journey stops, caring for cancer patients in rural Texas starts.
Mhm.
So those two work are connected.
Mhm.
Uh, to so yes, cultural understanding is very, very important. Even here, like there was a long article in New York Times because when I was teaching, I was reading all those things, and I had, I was a part of it. I was in Long Island Jewish Hospital training. Is that some Orthodox Jews sometimes they wouldn't talk about their cancers and all that to others. And not only that, there used to be, I don't know if it's still there, and the cancer center in New York, cancer clinic, there is no sign of cancer clinic there because
Mhm.
patients want to, they feel like that it will be bad for their families,
Mhm.
marriage and all that,
Yeah,
and acceptance. It's not just the Asian culture or
right.
South American culture or Mexican culture or culture, all cultures have their quirks. Nothing good or bad about it. So that Orthodox Jews sometimes are like that too. So you have to understand that as well. You don't want to impose your kind of thinking bluntly to them.
Mhm. Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about mortality quite a bit in recent years because there's been losses in my family and friend circles as I'm now in my 40s. And like, how do you navigate with the mounting illnesses and deaths as you continue to age? I know that you have seen a lot in your work and also in your own personal life. What does grief and healing look like when it can feel very exhausting?
Well, that's the truth. Sometimes it can feel like very exhausting, but you got to have certain amount of mental discipline, and you're not going to learn in 1 or 2 months. As you you're going to make your share of missteps, not necessarily blunder, but Uh, and as you go along, you learn through life, and learn through patients. You can learn from a patients a lot if you just listen to them carefully. And you don't need a whole lot of time. You don't obviously have to have a certain number of patients a day. But if you concentrate when you're talking to them, it doesn't take a whole lot of time. So in time you learn. If sometime you read and you watch your mentors when you're in training, and that's a lot. A good mentor can help you a lot. Plus, you learn from patients also, then learn from your family. So all these things kind of seep into your mind. Medical school alone is not going to teach you all those things now. And medical school's a little bit ivory tower. Okay.
Yeah.
So that if I don't know if that answers your question. As you go along, you learn through patients, you learn through reading and learn through your mentors what you have learned before, and you put it together. And as you go along, it comes to you.
Mhm. And also, these days, are you still practicing, and what does your time look like, in especially in the work or just in your own personal life? What does the time that you have now look like for you these days?
No, I have been retired since 2011. Now I
Mhm.
spend most of my time in writing. I've been writing for a long, like I said,
Mhm.
but I started book writing seriously from 2011. So this is my second book, and I'm working on third book. So my time is very, very occupied. I teach once in a while here and there, and then this formally I'm not teaching for right now. But if I'm called to teach a class, I will. Just like I did 2, 3 weeks ago to a group of pre-med students, selected students. They wanted to talk about the our connected lives. Okay, uh, caring for cancer free rural Texas. So I taught in the class, the university class. That, but mostly goes my writing and taking care of my family. And then the second is that I mean, I don't mean to be any pontificate. I help people as much as I can in a
Mhm.
voluntary work, working at, you know, uh, and then the second is that I get a lot of emails and then calls about patients have cancer, even though I'm retired since I've been here so long.
Mhm.
And I can't help them directly, but indirectly I try to help them that this is the kind of doctor to go to, or this is the contact that, you should give a try, but make sure to talk to your doctor first. It's very difficult to give advice on the telephone without
Right.
knowing the details, or examining patient. And I get calls from Bangladesh, and nowadays communication is so fast, emails and all that. So
Mhm.
that takes quite a bit of my time. And now I do quite a bit of book interview. Two book interviews that kept me busy. One came out 24 and on
Mhm.
now. So my schedule is quite full, and then keeping up with the children, grandchildren. So
Mhm.
one thing or the other, and I work at the university also.
Yeah. If you were to go back to your 7-year-old self, what would you tell that little boy?
That's a very difficult question to answer. I think that probably in retrospect, I obviously he didn't have a crystal. I tell that boy that, you have a life ahead of you. This
Mhm.
is not the end of it. And listen to your parent or whatever seniors trying to help you out, that they really mean well, they want to help you.
Mhm.
Uh, the way I felt at that time, at least right after my mother died, for these weeks and months, that I don't have anybody, which is really wrong, correct?
Mhm.
But I probably tell that seven, don't feel that way.
Mhm.
Okay, your mother is gone, but you have others to love you too.
That's very beautiful. And actually, I hope that people, there's a copy of your book, The Temple Road. I hope that people get to check out your book. Doctor, I want to say how much I really appreciate having you on my show and telling about your journey as a child and also giving us a scope, just like a snapshot of the work that you've been doing in the medical field, especially specifically with oncology and cancer treatment and having the very difficult conversations with families and patients about that because I do think that 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 we have so much to unlock about how we talk about grief and the kinds of grief that we experience along the way. And I think that to get that from the medical professional field really helps to kind of get an idea of how that has been changing and how empathy is the center of it all for to build trust,
Yes,
to have patients and families build trust with uh, the medical field.
I agree completely, Randy. I think you
Hmm.
summarized my feelings. That's why
Hmm.
you're a podcaster and I'm not. But thank you so much for having me too. First Bangladeshi, I suppose, and it doesn't matter Bangladeshi or not, or Vietnamese or Cambodian or Chinese. I
Hmm.
think the human beings are human beings. We all have the same grief, same feelings,
Hmm.
same mental strength or weakness. So as human beings, it matters to all of us about empathy and about understanding each other. That's what worries me now, that both in medicine and social life look like we have become so fragmented now.
Hmm.
And that's not good for none of us, whether you're white, black, brown, it won't really matter. It will hurt everybody.
Yeah, yeah,
So
absolutely. And thank you. And I hope that you have more time to yourself and with your family too. And yeah, I really appreciate this. And I hope people get a chance to pick up your book. And yes, and all the best to you.
thank you. Thank you. Same to you. All the best to you. And I saw some of the interviews. Really, I'm glad you being good people. That's the only way you can understand each other,
Hmm.
sharing ideas and thoughts. Okay.
Hmm.
It's not a monolithic. Human beings are not monolithic. We all have our different ideas. We may not agree, but
Hmm.
we have to keep an open mind. So thank you very much for having me. And I like the thing that you're breaking the bread. It is but breaking the bread,
It
whether you're
is. It
talking
really
about the
is.
business terms or social terms. That's a very good title. I like that. How
Yeah.
did you get to that?
Well, I think when I did the Banh Chronicles podcast, I wanted to the idea of breaking bread, but I thought banh mi was like the first Vietnamese food that I embraced. And
Correct.
because it felt very Western looking, because I grew up in a fairly predominantly white school, so the idea of me bringing in pho or anything that felt very foreign was very scary to me. So I thought that banh mi was the more palatable choice. And and I thought about how the idea of assimilation was very prevalent in my life for a long time until I realized that it's not helping me in my journey, nor is it helping people in their journeys, especially when you're forced to assimilate to Western traditions or Western normalization, and I realized that no, there's nothing to be ashamed of. So that's like the more complicated or more longer explanation of the title itself. And then, of course, the idea of breaking bread is very important to me because there's so much to unlock, and my mind runs 1,000 miles a minute, and I feel like there's so many interests that I have, but I think that what I have always get more drawn to is the vulnerability and the empathy aspect of this work. Yeah.
If I may add, I think that you made certain good points. No culture, no people, no country has all the monopoly on goodness or badness.
Mm-hmm.
I think, or talent for that matter.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we can learn from each other, from different, even doesn't matter, white, black, brown, we can learn from each other and to the benefit of all of us. I don't think any culture, any group has a monopoly
Mm-hmm.
talent or understanding or knowledge. They have different knowledge and different talent, but they're important too as part of life. So, yes, I think that breaking the bread done me is very important in that
Mm-hmm.
sense that we need to understand each other and we need to learn from each other.
Mm-hmm.
I feel always strongly actually since I was a little, I mean, I wouldn't say little kid, but since I was in college, this and that, started reading here and there, I realized that you know, I'm just insular. That doesn't make any sense. There are other people in the world, there are other stories, there are other it tells and all. So there must be something there. So that always very curious. There must be something there to know. Not that I knew a whole bunch, but that curiosity was in my mind. And it still is, but I have my limits of my talent and I have my share of it, but I do what I can. But thank you so much. You have been so kind and I appreciate that. Okay.